we reached $1 million in revenue before we did our first funding round. Yeah, so I was always very enthusiastic about everything I did. And my friend and I, we took it very seriously during high school. And out of 20,000 people, we were a top 20. So we hired 10 people from India and all around the world. Whatever I did, I always went right into it.
What's your perspective in terms of, crypto in Africa?
There are a lot of shortages or, foreign currency shortages in Africa, right? It's very difficult now.
You just built your first company. What happens after?
I wanted to do more than just making money in my life, Hospitals do not have the right medical equipment and products to properly treat their patients, mainly because...
All right, Tobias, welcome to the podcast, man. Yeah. Let's kick off with what are some of the key events, if you recall, that shaped you into the entrepreneur you are today or the person you are today?
Yeah, so I was always very enthusiastic about everything I did. First I wanted to become a football player, and then I played every day and made sure, I went to the right club and got the right training. Then I wanted to become a zoologist and bought a lot of reptiles. Whatever I did, I always went right into it. But I think where I kind of learned how to, grow something was actually an online browser game. It was called Travian, where you had to play against, 200,000 people and build your own empire. And my friend and I, we took it very seriously during high school. And out of 20,000 people, we were a top 20. So we hired 10 people from India and all around the world, and bought all kinds of hardware and really ran it very, very professionally, and even already used Scrum, had weekly meetings with all the people that we employed, and it was a lot of fun. And that's how I got into building something. And then right after high school, I kind of started with my first venture, but I think we'll get into that.
Yeah. I mean, let's actually get into it. So I read somewhere that one of the first ventures was in cryptocurrencies, right? You can tell me a little bit about it, and also with the current developments in that space. What's your view on the future of crypto?
Yeah, so what I did when I was 19, I think, I started with arbitrage trading. So back then, crypto just came up, and there were a lot of inefficient markets. One of them was crypto, where you could basically buy a coin and then transfer it to another exchange and make automatically a profit with that. You can run your own software, build your own software, algorithms that can even predict how the prices change over time. So my co-founder and I, we did that for, I think, more than 5 years, not only for crypto, but different, markets. And I also then got into crypto mining. So we had a, small mining farm that then eventually grew bigger and bigger. Unfortunately, then the first bubble happened and we just sold, when the prices went down. So there was some profit, obviously, that we made, but we could have made much more if we would have, kept them. But that showed me, unfortunately, that there's too much speculation in crypto. I think it is a very, very groundbreaking innovation, right? That you can send money anywhere, can be really anonymous, that it, doesn't depend on governments, right? And any kind of regulation, which also might be a problem, obviously, when it comes to terrorism, crime, and other things. But yeah, I think the idea itself is amazing, and unfortunately, people just used it to get rich and speculate, which is not sustainable because you have all these new coins coming up.
Yeah,
and then they bring new innovation. So why would you keep the old coins, right? That are eventually redundant. So it just doesn't make any sense. I think personally, one day there will be new coins that will be really used and they will be valuable because everyone needs them, right? But I don't think that personally Bitcoin has a future. I hope that there will be even more innovative cryptocurrencies and technologies that will replace these older, coins.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at, I know very little about crypto, right? Obviously, I mean, I watch a lot of news about it, a lot of companies who are building in that space. I do know a few founders who are in that space. But one thing that I've heard is that in countries like Nigeria, where withdrawing a certain amount of money is really hard, right? There's like a limit of how much money you can take out of the bank. And this pushes a lot of the entrepreneurs build in that space. So, what's your perspective in terms of, crypto in Africa? Is it going to solve this, these problems that are happening in countries like Nigeria? Or should we be looking at, let's have a conversation with the central bank and figure out ways that, we can increase the withdrawal limit?
Yeah, let me actually start with one of the major challenges that we face, of my other startup, which we'll probably discuss later.
Yeah.
There are a lot of dollar shortages or, foreign currency shortages in Africa, right? It's very difficult now to import any product. And I think that crypto could, solve some of these problems. Also smart contracts, blockchain in general, right? So I think, the whole ecosystem should be much more open to crypto, to blockchain and other technologies around, the whole space. And that will make hopefully all these economies more efficient. Yeah.
So you just built your first company. There's a crash. So you eventually stop building it. What happens after?
Well, so we were doing all kinds of arbitrage, right? So it did not affect us that much. But I wanted to do more than just making money in my life, Financially, it was very successful. I mean, as a young guy, in terms of like making money, but then also you spend that money and, materialistic things become important. And so I actually came to Rwanda because of my master thesis. So while I was an entrepreneur, I still did my undergraduate and my master's degree at the same time. It was really a hard time, a lot of work. But then I came here and immediately fell in love with the country. I saw all these opportunities that are out there, not just in Rwanda, but in general in Africa, especially East Africa. But here in Rwanda, I felt like this is a place where I can start, and learn how to do things in Africa. And where, the whole business environment is very transparent and supportive. And I met my Kenyan co-founder, Alex Muzilka, who's been working in the medical sector for 15 years. And when he showed me this massive problem in healthcare, that a lot of hospitals do not have the right medical equipment and products to properly treat their patients, mainly because they're not data-driven, we thought, why not using technology to solve it? And I thought, this would be a great opportunity for me to create impact, to do something meaningful with, the experience that I gained in my previous venture.
Yeah. And what were the early days of building VBag? Were you coming in as a technical founder or basically building the tech around it, or as a business developer?
Kind of both. So my co-founder had, also the business and medical background, right? So together we built the business, but I kind of built the innovative part. He built the medical part. So we brought everything together. We built our health demand simulation model, which basically, looks at what kind of medical equipment is available in a certain sector and region, and what is the health demand in that region. Looking at, demographic data, public health data. And then with that, we can identify healthcare infrastructure gaps. So we call it opportunities, right? And we can even predict the profitability of a certain medical equipment in that location by using predictive analytics. And then we can link them to financing partners like commercial banks and other, financial institutions, even fintechs. And we can link them to the right manufacturers. So we're, running a procurement platform that basically helps a hospital identify the right procurement decisions and access the products and financing.
Yeah. To me, it sounds like a obvious problem, right? Was there any other players in the market when you guys started out? So what was the competition landscape?
Yeah, our main competitors here in the region are actually traditional, distributors. They just import a medical product and then sell it. We have to pay in cash. There is no support. It's all pure trade, right? So my co-founder always had a very strong focus on quality, right? That we have a team of biomedical engineers, doctors, pharmacists, dentists that are looking for the right products for the local market. Might be different in Rwanda than it is in Burundi or Congo, Kenya. So really finding the right product for the local market and then offering trainings, for doctors and biomedical engineers, for the hospital staff on how to use this new technology. If it is an equipment, offering maintenance, offering financing. That is a very crucial part that, most competitors don't offer. And then, aggregating the demand for all these hospitals, right, with our model and thereby getting the much better prices. Yeah. So in a nutshell, what we're currently doing is actually unique in whole Africa. And it's also mainly made possible because of the support that we got from the Rwandan government, where, we got a lot of data to work with. Here, the whole ecosystem really wants to foster entrepreneurship and innovation. So with that, we were able to build a proof of concept, which we can now take also to Congo and even to Kenya and other countries.
And so to get started, did you guys build, was it a marketplace in the beginning? Was it just a needs assessment tool, let's say? So looking at what is needed? Basically, what I want to understand is what does an MVP look like for a solution like yours? Did you just have a lot of money, buy all the equipment, and then start selling them, or it started off quite different?
Yeah. So luckily, I came in with a bit of a startup capital, right, from a previous venture, and then we focused on dentistry because that's what my co-founder was specialized in. And we wanted to implement inventory optimization. So to help clinics know how much, anesthesia they need, how many consumables they need. And then with pattern mining, pattern recognition, really optimizing procurement. That was a challenge because a lot of hospitals record their inventory on paper, or on spreadsheets, and it's very difficult to get reliable data, which now we are getting because over time, you can build up that data set. But in the beginning, it was hard to get it. So this is why we then focused a bit more on equipment, where, we were able to collect data actively. And then we very soon got funding and then also entered into, partnerships with the public sector.
Yeah. What do you think makes Rwanda a good place for proving a concept?
I think here, first of all, people and the government and also businesses are very open, for innovation, right? Everyone wants to be part of this economic, improvement and then this economic change, right? And social change as well comes with it. And so it's a bit easier, I think, here to bring an innovation or a solution to the market than maybe in some other markets, right? And then at the same time, it's not yet as competitive as Kenya or Nigeria or South Africa, right? It's also not yet as developed, the whole economy, right? And as big. So you don't have that much international competition that you might have in South Africa, for example, right? So if you come with an innovation, the experience that I got, and I think most founders had, is that you really, you're welcomed here, right? And it's always, or most of the times, very unique what you're doing here. And then once you've proven yourself, then you can use that, first of all, to raise more capital and become more competitive, right? Improve your solution, spend more marketing in a bigger market. And also you can use it to show other, potential customers or governments, right, in other countries, what you have done in Rwanda. Yeah. And Rwanda has a very good reputation also in Africa.
That's true. That's true. It definitely helps when you're trying to go to other markets. When they hear it's Rwanda, there's a good view of that. I want to talk a little bit about specifically that. So a lot of companies in Rwanda get stuck in Rwanda, right? Because I have this opinion about building in Rwanda, which is, it makes you a little bit lazy, right? Because the market is very different from other markets, right? Number one, there's basically zero corruption in the country. So it makes it very easy for you to start a business, operate your business, and really run it smoothly. But also, it makes you lazy in a way that, you are not as incentivized to go to other markets, right? Because you're like, okay, let's try to operate in Rwanda. It's much better. It's much easier. It's much safer than other markets. Let's stay here. But then you've been able to build from Rwanda for Africa, right? How did you get that perspective of other markets, right? Because there's also that fear of scaling because you're like, I don't know what Kenya looks like. I don't know what Uganda looks like. How did you overcome that fear? And how did you start building for Africa instead?
Yeah. Well, from the beginning on, it was very clear to me and clear to our team that, investors want you to scale, right? And if you're only in Rwanda, it's much, much harder to raise capital, right? You can build a nice proof of concept, but as you said, if you stay here for too long without scaling, then people are going to question if you can really, work all across Africa with your solution and compete against other companies. So I pretty much pushed right from the beginning, to expand the company, which also cost some capital, right? I think with the first funding round that we got, we already started in both Kenya and in DRC. Very bold. Yeah, that was, if I could change it, the problem is, that there's also some risk, right? If we would have invested everything in DRC and something would have gone wrong, right? Or same with Kenya and it wouldn't have worked out, would have really affected us, right? The advantage that I think Rwanda has is that actually a lot of, customers and people, businesses are coming from Burundi, from Congo, crossing the border, to do business here, right? And from the beginning on, we had a lot of hospitals that came all the way to Kigali to buy medical equipment from VBag, without any technology, without financing, without anything that we offered, just because we had it. So we saw a huge potential there. And yeah, operating, in another market like Congo is obviously very challenging. It takes a lot of time. So I think if we would have only focused on Rwanda, maybe we would have grown even more in Rwanda, right? But that was a key point for investors that we were able to scale in other countries.
Yeah.
And that's a key reason why we got funding, basically. Yeah. And also have a Kenyan co-founder, so that made it easier to start in Kenya.
Yeah, exactly. So we're seeing a lot of companies closing down right now, right? Because either they're not able to fundraise in time, or they raise too much funding, or they're not able to find product market fit, right? A lot of the challenges that we have in Africa, we're seeing an entrepreneur coming up and trying to build a software to try and solve the problem. And sometimes it doesn't work. I want to get your perspective on that point, and then we can talk a little bit more about the fundraising landscape.
Yeah, so actually when we started VBag, I wanted to just have a online platform for procurement, right? But my Kenyan co-founder also told me this, it would be very difficult to convince customers to use a platform and just buy everything online and then drop ship the product here, right? And just have a pure digital business. And I think she was really right, as you just mentioned, for a lot of businesses, if you only offer technology, it's much harder actually to gain traction, right? And as I mentioned in Congo, hospitals, they need quality products much more than they want to buy a product online, right? Or they want procurement optimization because maybe they only have capital for a box of gloves, right? So how does it help them to know that if they bring an X-ray machine, they will make this kind of profit, right? So back to your question, I think that it really helps when you have a so-called hybrid model where you offer both, software and some kind of hardware or product, right? To actually innovate a current business that is being done here on the continent and that is still needed, right? Because there's a difference between innovation where you, or let's say disruption of a market where you build a completely new business model, right? And then innovating a current existing business model and improving it, right, with technology. And I think it's much, much harder, as we've seen from, unfortunately, a lot of companies that have closed down, to disrupt an industry in Africa because there's still, so many gaps when it comes to infrastructure, to basic services that are needed, that have to become much more efficient. If you look at the banking sector, right, it takes forever to do a transfer here because often you have to go physically to a bank. In many African countries, there's not yet an efficient online banking system. Or if it is, it's, often very dangerous to use it because it's not as safe maybe, So if you build a bank, for example, right, and then really have a much better technology that you're offering through your bank, that might be more successful than building a very, very disruptive fintech company, right?
Yeah.
That might not yet be needed by people that don't even have a bank account.
Do you think it's basically applying the Silicon Valley mentality to Africa, basically just clicking copy paste and trying to make everything a software as a service business instead of really looking at what exactly is wrong here? Do you think that who's bringing that mentality? Is it the investors? Is it the entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think the investors are bringing it, right? Every entrepreneur wants to build a big company. But if you then look, who is raising a lot of money, those are companies that are building very disruptive models, in Europe, America, right? But these models would be much harder to build, these new business models, right, in Africa, because you still lack, a lot of other things. So I think it's really the investors that are pushing for it. When we did our first fundraising round, I talked to a lot of Silicon Valley investors, and they were only interested in the pure software business, right? And I kept explaining to them that, yes, eventually we want to become the Amazon of medical supplies in Africa. But right now with the regulations, you cannot just drop ship a product to a hospital. You have to have a license, which means you have to have a physical shop, You have to offer maintenance. People want to touch a product before they buy it. They want to see that this is, good quality, right? So there's not yet the same trust maybe out there that is, in Europe when it comes to e-commerce. So there are a lot of, differences when it comes to, Africa in general, right? Especially sub-Saharan Africa and maybe the Western world, right? And I think that investors often do not yet fully understand the African ecosystem. You do have a lot of great African VCs or African-focused VCs, but even there, the focus was always on technology, right? And only software as a service. And that, was fine in a market where there was a lot of capital available to build these technologies, a lot of patient capital as well, right? A lot of very high valuation multiples. But now, when with a downturn, it's much, much harder to build that out, to raise, 200 million. For example, if we look at Babylon Health, right? Unfortunately, they went bankrupt, as probably a lot of you know. And I think they're a great company. They raised more than $1 billion in capital, right? That they burned. And trying to build more and more business models, more than 20 different business models, tech solutions that they have built to get the right product market fit. But right now, with the current cost of capital, right, it is almost impossible to try out these things, to burn so much money. So I think now we see a shift towards more of hybrid business models. Obviously, that's not for every sector. In AI, you don't need to have a hybrid model where you have hardware or, some physical shop. But there are definitely some sectors like logistics, supply chain, also healthcare to some extent, right? Finance maybe, that also need some physical shop and, some brick and mortar business maybe that is also then innovating through technology.
I think I would also add education to the list. I think it's something that I've definitely realized as well. There's so many different challenges, right? So many infrastructure problems. You can't be building an e-learning platform when majority or more than 50% of your potential users don't even access a smartphone or internet at home. How are they supposed to become users? They can only use your products when they go to a IT facility or when they're at school. So many different challenges. You have to have that hybrid model. Let's talk a little bit about the fundraising landscape, right? So I think you just touched on it a little bit, saying that this is now what's working. So you have a lot of entrepreneurs coming up on the continent, right? Trying to build solutions. What's your view when it comes to fundraising? Should every company fundraise? Does every company need external funding as opposed to bootstrapping, right? I've spoken to a lot of entrepreneurs, started to realize that the entrepreneurs who are very reluctant to take on external funding actually end up doing really well, as opposed to the ones who either fundraise too early and now they have too much cash, now they don't know what to do with it. They have to build all these fancy, cool technologies that are not really needed and burn through money. So when you look at what's happening right now, what's your advice, right, to people who are trying to build solutions on the continent when it comes to fundraising?
Yeah, I mean, I also went through this learning experience, right? I think as an entrepreneur, when you're on LinkedIn, when you use social media, you always see 50 million, Series A, 100 million here, there. And again, money might not actually be the reason why you're an entrepreneur, but unfortunately, often you're evaluated, right, based on how much money you have raised as a founder, right? If you go to an event, to a conference, people ask you, how much did you raise, right? So I think that's a bit wrong, because it should be probably about like, how sustainable is your business, right? And during these times of, I would say, easy capital, it was, not that hard to raise money when you already had investors and you showed top line revenue growth, right? But now profitability is much more important, because we don't know what is going on in the world, right? And when we can start raising again, as we used to raise as entrepreneurs. So I think my advice right now would be to try to really bootstrap the company as long as possible. This is also what we did. We reached $1 million in revenue before we did our first funding round. And really make sure, and we were already profitable when we did that, and really make sure that you have a very, very solid business model. And then I would still advise to really raise money if you have a very innovative solution that could be copied by others. If you wait too long, someone else will just come in and, raise a lot of money and then take you out of the market, right? So I think it has to be the right mix, right? But really first getting the right product market fit, if possible, through, with your own capital, through bootstrapping, because it will ensure that you're very efficient, that you really understand your company, right? If you hire all these people that do everything and you no longer talk to customers, you no longer know what's going on in the market, then I think the company will not be as efficient and maybe even as innovative as it could be if you really understand what is going on. But once you've figured it out and you're ready to now really scale, then I think you should really raise aggressively and scale the company to make sure that you are the one who is innovating.
it almost feels like we've forgotten what is the pure point of building all these solutions, right? We're kind of like mixing up startups and being an SME. Some people are like, oh, I don't want to become an SME. I don't want to bootstrap. I need to be one of those cool founders who are at a conference and say, yeah, we've raised $50 million. This is what we're doing, da, da, da. And we're almost forgetting that, hey, the point for all of this, or also the biggest companies in the world started off very small. They did not raise a lot of money. Apple, they were selling, computer parts, and getting paid from the customer before they even thought about trying to get all this external funding. But feels like right now we want to throw technology at it and we want to become a tech entrepreneur for the wrong reasons and not, remembering that it's a business. It needs to make money. It's not a science project, Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about education in two ways. So the first one is, what's your view on education being a key pillar into making a great entrepreneur? And number two, we're going to talk a little bit about what do you think is wrong with the current education system in terms of producing talented people for companies?
I think in general, right, if we look at it globally, I think that education is important, for anyone, right? For an entrepreneur, for an employee, anyone in this world should have a good education to, first of all, be able to communicate, right? To be able to, think analytically, right? There are certain skills that are definitely needed. As I said, analytical thinking, right? Knowing how I can find certain information that I need, right? And you often get it in schools if the schools focus on that. So I have seen that this is happening in, America and Europe to some extent. In my school, I was lucky that I had this kind of model, that probably you've heard of Montessori and other models, where children are a bit more free in, learning, right? What they really want to learn. But here, in Africa, unfortunately, I think it's a bit hierarchical, right? Where children have to learn something. They don't have enough, teachers to really work with each child and identify what are the strengths of a child, right? What are the skills that they have and how can they develop it? But as an entrepreneur in general, I think it does help if you go to college. First of all, if you have a degree, some investors or even customers take you more seriously. So I would not advise to just say, no, I'll become an entrepreneur and I don't study. Because also when you study, you probably develop, interest in certain fields in which you can then work. If, for example, you're a doctor, right, you study medicine, maybe you want to work in healthcare or health tech as an entrepreneur. If you work in finance, maybe you want to do fintech. Obviously, a lot that you're learning, will not be that useful, right? So I think we need to change the overall educational system, right? What we are learning, especially nowadays with AI, where you can just ask anything and you get, the information. So there's no need to learn what happened in, 1820 in a certain country, right? And then you forget it. Most of what I've learned, I've always been an excellent student because I thought, I had to have straight A's to succeed in life, right? But I wish I would have enjoyed life a bit more and focused on the things that, really interested me, right? Instead of learning things that nowadays I don't even remember anymore.
Do you feel like you've found your calling with VBag?
Yeah, I think with social entrepreneurship, I found my calling. So through VBag, I learned about social entrepreneurship as a startup founder. So I really, want to, build a solution that can change the world. I want to build a company that really creates impact. Yeah. What
would you be doing if you're not building VBag today?
Yeah, I would definitely be building another company, right? But probably also, focusing a bit more on AI and the social impact. When you're an entrepreneur, you have a lot of ideas. You see that with Elon Musk, right? And you have a lot of resources and big network. You can easily start a lot of different startups. But that's, where I think what, makes a lot of founders actually fail. Because if you have 5 projects and you don't focus on one thing, you only have 24 hours per day. So now I really want to make VBag work. And then I'm sure I'll find my next, startup. Yeah.
Yeah. Is entrepreneurship for everybody?
Unfortunately not. It is extremely difficult. So, I actually had several businesses. So my first business, when I was making a decent amount of money, I invested in different businesses. I had 2 nightclubs in Serbia. I had a holding company, with a software development company. I did all kinds of stuff, right? And I've seen the ups and downs, right? And I think if you are not resilient, I think you can develop the skills that you need. Everyone can develop the skills that you need to be an entrepreneur. You have to be resilient. You have to be hardworking and disciplined, right? You have to be innovative. You have to be a good communicator, good, people person. But then everyone could be an entrepreneur, but, not everyone maybe should be an entrepreneur. If you just want to enjoy life and relax, right? Probably should work in the public sector.
Some people want to become an entrepreneur so they can work hard and then they can enjoy life after.
Yeah, but the problem is that once you start as an entrepreneur, it's very difficult to stop because you're so enthusiastic and building things. New ideas every day. And so just look at Warren Buffett, for example. I think he's now 91 and he's still working, And you see that with almost all these entrepreneurs, they worked until they died, right?
That's true.
Which is a good thing, actually. If they enjoyed it, I think most of them really enjoyed it. So back to your question, I think if you're an entrepreneur, if those people that should be an entrepreneur that are already somehow entrepreneurial, it's just within you that you want to take initiative, you want to do something, right? Doesn't even have to be innovative. There's a difference between, an entrepreneur and a startup founder, right? But you can be an entrepreneur and run a, shoe shop, right? And that can be a great thing and you are free, right? So I think it's about freedom and about self-fulfillment.
How would your co-founder describe you in 3 words?
Stubborn. I'm a perfectionist. So I really want everything to be done to the level best because I believe in everyone actually that we have, in our company, but also the people that we work with, customers, business partners. And I always set the bar very high. So I think, anyone that I work with sometimes, has to suffer a bit. But it's also a good thing because I think it unlocks, the potential of everyone. Right. And I would want everyone to do the same with me. So to be very open, to give me feedback, right, how I can improve. The second thing I think is resourceful, because I love to network and to, see how we can build an ecosystem here with what we're doing at VBag, but also in general in, Rwanda or in Africa. And the third point, I think, is fun, because you can also have fun at work. And, I remember when we shared an office, when we were still a smaller company, and we worked very hard. But every now and then we, talked about our private life. We are actually very good friends. We started as very good friends. So work should also be fun as much as I'm a perfectionist, right? You can also enjoy the process.
Yeah. I mean, you own 3 nightclubs. So Definitely makes sense for you to be fun. Where do you see VBag in the next 5 years? What should we expect?
So right now, as we are, really showing both the private sector and the public sector and even financing partners that our health demand simulation model is a unique innovation, right? A groundbreaking innovation. I think that we will also expand to other countries because we got a lot of positive feedback from other African governments that want us to come there and build out the health demand simulation model. So I'm very confident that in 5 years, you will see us in at least, 3 or 4 more countries in East Africa and as a major player in the industry.
Yeah. Tobias, thank you so much for the work you're doing on the African continent. And thank you for coming through.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right.